One whisper. That was all it took to end Vivian's life as she knew it. She stood in the middle of New York's most exclusive gala and made the mistake of looking at the most dangerous man in the room, Dominic Valerius. She thought he couldn't hear her over the jazz and the clinking champagne glasses. She whispered, "He's handsome." She was wrong. He heard everything. And when the Alpha King locks the door, you don't leave until he decides you belong to him. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a hunt. Vivian Clark checked her reflection in the darkened window of the 40th floor, smoothing the silk of her emerald gown. It was a borrowed dress, just like everything else in her life tonight. As a junior crisis manager for Sterling and O'Connell PR, she wasn't at the Obsidian Gala to drink the $50 a glass champagne. She was there to ensure her client, a reckless tech heir, didn't punch a waiter. The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was suffocating, smelling of expensive perfume and old money, but the atmosphere shifted the moment the double doors swung open. The room didn't just go quiet, it froze. Walking in was Dominic Valerius. The tabloids called him the Wolf of Wall Street, a cliché that Vivian found lazy, though looking at him now, she understood the predator analogy. He was 6'4" of brooding violence, wrapped in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. His hair was dark, swept back with a careless precision, and his eyes were a startling, unnatural shade of amber that seemed to glow under the chandeliers. He moved through the crowd like a shark parting a school of fish. People didn't just step aside, they flinched. Jesus. Chloe, Vivian's co-worker, hissed into her ear, clutching her clutch so hard her knuckles were white. That's him. Valerius. They say he bought out the Harrington merger just to fire the board of directors for looking at him wrong. Vivian took a sip of her water, watching him. Dominic Valerius was currently staring down a senator who looked ready to wet himself. There was a raw, kinetic energy rolling off him, a magnetic field of pure aggression. He was terrifying. He was a monster in a suit. But as he turned, catching the light, the harsh lines of his face softened for a fraction of a second. Vivian, exhausted from a 70-hour work week and lowered inhibitions due to sleep deprivation, leaned toward Chloe. She kept her voice low, barely a breath against the ambient noise of the string quartet. "He's terrifying," Vivian whispered, her eyes locked on his profile. "But you have to admit, the Alpha King is handsome." It was a joke, a sarcasm-drenched comment using the nickname the press mocked him with. But Dominic stopped. He was 50 feet away. The room was loud. There was no way he could have heard her. Yet his head snapped in her direction with the precision of a rifle bolt. Vivian's breath hitched. Those amber eyes locked onto hers across the sea of black ties and diamond necklaces. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't look away. He didn't blink. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring slightly, as if he were catching a scent on the wind. "Oh God," Chloe squeaked. "Why is he looking at us?" Dominic changed course. He abandoned the senator and walked straight toward them. His stride was predatory, eating up the distance. The crowd parted instantly, creating a wide berth, leaving Vivian exposed. "Run!" Her instincts screamed. "Run now!" But her feet were led. Dominic stopped directly in front of her, up close. He was overwhelming. The heat radiating from him was intense, smelling of cedar, rain, and something metallic like blood on a cold coin. "What did you say?" His voice was a low rumble, a baritone that vibrated in her chest bone. Vivian swallowed, trying to summon her professional composure. "Mr. Valerius, I was just... You called me Alpha," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. It's just what the papers say," she stammered. stepping back. Her heel caught on the hem of her dress, and she stumbled. He didn't reach out to catch her. He just loomed over her, his eyes scanning her face, her neck, her pulse point. "And you called me handsome." Vivian's face flushed hot. "I think you misheard me." "Sir, I never mishear," he murmured. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. The intimacy was shocking, public, and possessive. "And I never mistake a scent." He pulled back, his eyes darkening to a pool of black. He raised a hand, snapping his fingers. Two massive men in dark suits materialized from the shadows. "Clear the East Lounge," Dominic ordered, never taking his eyes off Vivian. "Lock it." "Wait," Vivian protested, panic finally piercing her shock. "I have to work. My client is—" Dominic's hand shot out, wrapping around her upper arm. His grip was iron, inescapable, yet strangely careful not to bruise. "You're done working." He literally dragged her, though with an odd elegance toward the private VIP lounge. The heavy mahogany doors slammed shut behind them, cutting off the music, the chatter, and the safety of the public eye. Vivian heard the distinct, heavy click of the deadbolt sliding home. She spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Dominic stood by the door, his hand still on the lock. He ripped his bow tie loose, the fabric tearing with the force, and unbuttoned his collar as if he were suffocating. A low sound tore from his throat, not a word, but a growl. A real, animalistic growl that no human vocal cords should be capable of producing. "You," he rasped, his voice sounding shredded. "You have no idea what you've done." "Let me out," Vivian demanded, though her voice shook. "This is kidnapping. I'll scream. There are senators out there. Dominic." He laughed, a dark, humorless sound. He stepped toward her, and she stepped back until her spine hit the cold glass of the window overlooking Central Park. He slammed his hands against the glass on either side of her head, caging her in. His eyes were glowing again, incandescent gold. "Scream," he challenged, his face inches from hers. "Let them hear. Let them know." "Know what?" she whispered, tears of fear pricking her eyes. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling deeply, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin over her jugular. Vivian froze, a jolt of electricity, pure, hot, and terrifying, arcing down her spine. "That you are mine." The word wasn't spoken. It was roared into her skin, vibrating through her very marrow. Vivian didn't faint, though the biological urge to play dead was overwhelming. Instead, she shoved him. It was like shoving a brick wall. Dominic didn't budge. He just pulled back slowly, looking at her with an expression that terrified her more than the aggression, hunger. Not sexual hunger, though that was there, thick and heavy, but something ancient. He looked at her like a starving man looks at bread. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice trembling. "I am going to call the police." Dominic stepped back, running a hand through his hair. He seemed to be fighting a war within his own body. His muscles were twitching, his jaw clenched so tight a vein throbbed in his temple. "The police," he repeated, his voice returning to a semblance of human normalcy, though it was still rough. "Chief of Police Harrison is on my payroll. So is the mayor. Try again. Vivian Clark." She froze. He knew her name. "How do you know who I am?" "I know everything about what is mine," he said, walking over to the bar in the corner of the lounge. He poured a glass of amber liquid whiskey, neat, and downed it in one swallow. The glass cracked in his hand, shards falling to the carpet. He didn't seem to notice. "I am not a thing," Vivian snapped, her anger finally overriding her fear. She was a crisis manager. She fixed disasters for a living. This was just a disaster. "I am a person, and I am leaving." She marched toward the door. "If you walk out that door," Dominic said quietly, not turning around, "I will buy the PR firm you work for and liquidate it by morning. Your friend Chloe unemployed, your boss bankrupt, and you. I will hunt you down in public instead of private." Vivienne's hand hovered over the lock. She turned slowly. "What do you want?" Dominic turned. His eyes were back to a dark brown, but the intensity remained. "I need you to sign a contract." "A contract?" She blinked. "You lock me in a room, growl at me like a lunatic, and you want to offer me a job. Not a job, a life," Dominic corrected. He walked to a sleek leather armchair and sat down, gesturing for her to sit opposite him. "Sit down. Vivienne, we have a lot to discuss, and my patience is hanging by a very thin thread." Vivienne sat, perched on the edge of the seat, ready to bolt. "You are not human," she said. It was the only logical conclusion to the growl, the eyes, the strength. "What are you?" Dominic looked at her, assessing her resilience. "I am the alpha of the Valerius Pack. We control the eastern seaboard, the finance sector, real estate, shipping. It's all Pack territory." "Werewolves," she said flatly. "You're telling me you're a werewolf, like in a teenage drama." "Lycanthrope," he corrected coolly. "And we are nothing like the stories. We are territorial, we are violent, and we are bound by laws you cannot understand, one of which you just triggered." "I didn't trigger anything." "You spoke the words," Dominic said, leaning forward. "You acknowledged me, and I acknowledged you. My wolf, the entity inside me, it chose you. It's called imprinting, mating, call it what you want. But biologically, chemically, I am now wired to protect you, possess you, and kill anyone who threatens you." Vivienne stared at him. "You're insane. I'm leaving." "The contract," Dominic interrupted, pulling a folded document from his tuxedo jacket. It was already prepared. "Read it." Vivienne took the paper with shaking hands. It wasn't a marriage license. It was a non-disclosure agreement and an employment contract. Role private liaison to the CEO. Salary $2 million per annum. Conditions: must reside at the Valerius estate. Must not leave the premises without security detail. Must not engage in romantic relations with any other individual. "This is slavery with a paycheck," Vivienne spat, throwing the paper on the table. "This is protection," Dominic snarled, his composure cracking again. He stood up, towering over her. "Do you think I'm the only one who heard you? There are others in this room. Vivienne. Rivals. Wolves from the northern packs who would love nothing more than to find the Alpha King's weakness and rip her throat out just to watch me bleed." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His touch was scorching. "You are a target now, because of me, because of what we are. If you walk out that door alone, you will be dead by sunrise. Gavin, my brother, is probably watching the exits right now." Vivienne's blood ran cold. The specific name Gavin made it feel real. It wasn't a vague threat anymore. "Why me?" she whispered. "I'm nobody." Dominic's thumb brushed her lower lip, his gaze dropping to her mouth. The hunger returned, raw and devastating. "That," he murmured, "is what I intend to find out. You smell like rain and ozone. You smell like home." Suddenly, a heavy pounding echoed on the door. "Dominic," a voice shouted from the other side. "Open the door. The council is watching." Dominic's eyes flashed gold. He looked at Vivienne. "That's Gavin. If he comes in here and sees you without my mark, without my claim, he will challenge me for you. And if he wins, you belong to him." He stepped closer, his body pressing her into the chair. "Sign the paper. Vivian. Or I claim you right here, on this floor, in front of them all." "Claim?" Vivian asked, breathlessly. "I bite you," Dominic said, baring his teeth. "I mark you, and then your life as a human is truly over." The pounding on the door got louder. The wood began to splinter. Vivian looked at the contract, then at the door, then at the man who looked like a god of war, ready to burn the world down for her. She grabbed the pen. The mahogany door to the VIP lounge splintered inward, just as Vivian's pen left the paper. The ink was barely dry on her signature when the wood gave way. Standing in the frame was Gavin Valerius. If Dominic was a thunderstorm, Gavin was a calm, frozen lake beautiful, still, and hiding things that would drown you. He was blonde, leaner than Dominic, wearing a white tuxedo that made him look like a fallen angel. "Too late, brother," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a subsonic rumble that rattled the crystal glasses on the bar. He snatched the contract from the table and tucked it into his inner pocket. "She is employed by the Alpha. She is under pack protection." Gavin's blue eyes flicked to Vivian. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A human employee for the private liaison role, Dominic. The Council will eat you alive. You know the rules. Only a wolf can handle the strain of being near an Alpha of your magnitude." "She signed," Dominic said, stepping between Gavin and Vivian, using his broad shoulders to block Gavin's line of sight. "Touch her, and I will rip your arm off and beat you with it in front of the senator." Gavin held up his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just worried about the girl. She looks like she's about to faint. Does she know she's walking into a slaughterhouse?" "Get the car," Dominic ordered. "Now." Gavin's smile vanished. He bowed, slightly mocking, always mocking, and turned on his heel. Dominic turned to Vivian. The golden glow was gone from his eyes, replaced by a weary, dark brown. He looked exhausted, like a man holding up the sky. "Can you walk, or do I have to carry you?" "I can walk," Vivian said, though her legs felt like jelly. "But I need my phone and my coat." "Your coat is gone. Your phone is compromised," Dominic said, guiding her toward a private service elevator at the back of the lounge. "I'll buy you a new phone and a new coat. From now on, you leave everything from your old life behind." They exited the Pierre Hotel, not through the lobby, but through the kitchen, emerging into a private loading dock where a convoy of 3 black-armored Escalades was waiting. The rain had started to pour, blurring the New York City lights into streaks of neon. Dominic shoved her into the back of the middle vehicle. The interior was hermetically sealed, smelling of leather and sanitized air. He slid in beside her, the heavy door thudding shut like a bank vault. As the car lurched forward, merging into the chaotic traffic of Fifth Avenue, the silence stretched between them. Vivian pressed herself against the door. Watching the city roll by, she felt like she was watching a movie of her own life. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice small in the quiet cabin. "You said I smell like home. That's not a reason to pay me $2 million and kidnap me." Dominic loosened his tie completely, tossing it onto the floor. He poured a glass of water from a crystal decanter built into the console and handed it to her. "Drink. You're in shock." Vivian took it, her hands shaking. "My pack," Dominic began, staring straight ahead at the partition separating them from the driver, "is not a family. It is a corporation, a militarized hierarchy. I took the throne, the CEO position, by killing the previous Alpha. My uncle," Vivian choked on the water. "You killed your uncle. He was weak," Dominic said coldly. "And in our world, weakness is a death sentence for the whole pack. But taking power requires maintenance. The Alpha energy inside me is a fire. It burns constantly. Without a mate, without an anchor. That fire consumes the host. I am going insane. Vivian! He turned to look at her, and for the first time, she saw the desperation behind the arrogance. I haven't slept more than 2 hours a night in 3 years. My temper is fraying. My control is slipping. When you whispered my name in that ballroom, it was the first time in a decade that the noise in my head stopped. Just for a second. Silence. He reached out, his hand hovering over her hand on the seat. He didn't touch her, respecting the boundary she had set, but the heat from his palm was palpable. I don't need you for sex, he said, his voice rough. I need you so I don't turn into a feral beast and slaughter half of Manhattan. You are my sedative. You are my sanity. Vivian looked at his hand. It was large, scarred, capable of incredible violence, yet it was trembling slightly. So I'm a human tranquilizer, she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. You are the most valuable asset in my empire, Dominic corrected. And right now, you are the most vulnerable. The car slowed down. Vivienne looked out the window. They weren't in the city anymore. They were passing through massive iron gates, flanked by stone gargoyles. They had driven north, deep into the opulent isolation of Tuxedo Park, a gated community of historic mansions where old money went to hide. The Valerius estate was a fortress of grey stone and black glass, perched on a cliff overlooking a dark, storm-tossed lake. It looked like a castle built by a villain in a Gothic novel. Welcome home, Dominic murmured. As the car stopped, the door was wrenched open from the outside. But it wasn't a servant, it was a woman. She was tall, with hair like spun platinum and eyes that were cold, hard chips of ice. She wore a silk dressing gown that left very little to the imagination. Dominic, the woman purred, ignoring Vivian completely. You're late. The council is waiting in the library. Dominic stepped out, his demeanor instantly hardening. The vulnerable man in the car was gone. The Alpha King was back. Veronica, he acknowledged, his voice flat. Move. Veronica didn't move. Her gaze finally slid to Vivian, who was climbing out of the car into the rain. Veronica's lip curled in a sneer of pure disgust. And what? Veronica asked, sniffing the air theatrically. Did you pick up a stray dog on the way home? She smells like cheap perfume and fear. Careful, Veronica, Dominic warned, a low growl vibrating in his chest. She is the new liaison, and she is under my personal protection. Liaison, Veronica laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Is that what we're calling warm bodies now, Dominic? You can't bring a human into the inner circle. She won't last a week. I'll break her before breakfast. Dominic grabbed Veronica's arm, his grip bruising. Touch her, and I strip you of your rank. Is that clear? Gamma. Veronica flinched, pain flashing across her face, but she nodded. Crystal. Dominic released her and turned to Vivian, placing a hand on the small of her back to guide her up the massive stone steps. Don't look at her, Dominic whispered in Vivian's ear. Don't show her fear. She feeds on it. Vivian walked up the stairs, her heart pounding. She had survived the ballroom, but she had the distinct feeling that the real danger hadn't been the Alpha King. It was the pack he ruled. The interior of the Valerius estate was a study in intimidation. The ceilings were 30 feet high, the floors were black marble, and the art on the walls consisted of violent, abstract oil paintings that looked like splashes of blood. Dominic had left Vivian in the East Wing guest suite, a room larger than her entire Brooklyn apartment, with strict instructions to lock the door and open it for no one but him. She hadn't slept. She had spent the night sitting in a velvet armchair, staring at the heavy oak door, listening to the sounds of the house, footsteps, muffled arguments, the occasional howl from the woods outside that sounded far too human to be a wolf. By morning, hunger forced her out. She cautiously opened her door. The hallway was empty. She remembered Dominic mentioning breakfast was served in the solarium at 8 a.m. It was 8:15. Navigating the mansion was a nightmare, but she followed the smell of coffee and bacon. She found the solarium, a beautiful glass-walled room flooded with grey morning light. The table was set for 12, but only 3 people were seated. Dominic was at the head, reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, while drinking black coffee. Gavin was to his right, looking fresh and rested, scrolling on a tablet, and Veronica was to his left. When Vivian entered, the conversation stopped. "Ah, the pet emerges," Gavin said, flashing a bright, dangerous smile. "Sleep well, Vivian." The East Wing is known to be drafty, ghosts of the victims and all that. "Gavin," Dominic warned, not looking up from his paper. "Good morning," Vivian said, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. She was wearing the only clothes she had, her evening gown from the night before, now wrinkled and ridiculous in the morning light. She walked to the empty chair opposite Veronica. A servant, a quiet man with nervous eyes, immediately placed a plate of eggs and fruit in front of her. "You look ridiculous," Veronica said, stabbing a sausage with her fork. "We have a dress code here. Silk for evening, tactical gear for training, not whatever that is." "I wasn't given a chance to pack," Vivian replied, picking up her fork. "Since I was kidnapped," Dominic lowered his paper, "I have ordered a wardrobe for you. It arrives at noon. Until then, you will wear one of my shirts. Elias will bring it to you." "Your shirt," Veronica's fork clattered onto her plate. "Dominic, that is inappropriate. That is a mating signal." "It is practical," Dominic said. "Eat your breakfast." "Veronica." Veronica's eyes narrowed. She reached for the pitcher of orange juice. "Here, let me help you. Liaison." She poured juice into Vivian's glass, but as she pulled the pitcher back, she accidentally tipped it. A cascade of sticky, orange pulp poured directly onto Vivian's lap, soaking the expensive emerald silk of her borrowed dress. "Oops," Veronica said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Clumsy me." Vivian jumped up, the cold liquid seeping through to her skin. It was a petty, high school bully move. But in this house, with these people, it felt like a declaration of war. "You did that on purpose?" Vivian said, her voice rising. "Prove it," Veronica challenged, leaning back and crossing her arms. "Go on. Cry to the Alpha. Show him how weak you are." Vivian looked at Dominic. He hadn't moved. He was watching her, his amber eyes unreadable. He wasn't going to save her. He was testing her. If she couldn't handle a glass of juice, she couldn't handle his world. Vivian took a deep breath. She picked up her own glass full of juice and looked Veronica in the eye. "I don't cry," Vivian said. She didn't throw the juice. That would be childish. Instead, she deliberately poured it onto the table, right onto the stack of files Veronica had been working on next to her plate. The liquid soaked instantly into the documents. "Oops," Vivian said, mimicking Veronica's tone perfectly. "Clumsy me." The room went dead silent. Veronica stood up so fast her chair fell backward. Her eyes flashed a brilliant, neon yellow, the eyes of a wolf shifting. A low growl ripped from her throat. "You little—" Veronica lunged across the table, her fingernails elongating into claws. Slam! Dominic's hand hit the heavy oak table. The wood cracked. A spiderweb fracture split right down the center, separating Vivian and Veronica. "Enough!" Dominic said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The power in his voice hit them like a physical wave of pressure. Veronica froze, half-shifted, her face contorted in rage. "Sit down, Gamma," Dominic ordered. "You started it. She finished it. That is the law of the challenge." Veronica slowly sat down, her chest heaving, her eyes returning to human color. She glared at Vivian with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. Dominic turned his gaze to Vivian. For a second, she thought he was angry. But then, she saw it, the corner of his mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. "Elias," Dominic called out. The butler appeared instantly. "Clean this up, and get Ms. Clark one of my white Oxfords, the heavy cotton ones." Dominic stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Vivian, come with me. It's time you saw what you really signed up for." Vivian followed him, leaving a fuming Veronica and a smirking Gavin behind. Dominic led her down a flight of stairs, hidden behind a tapestry, deep into the basement levels of the estate. The air grew colder, smelling of steel and electricity. "You handled yourself well," Dominic said, not looking back. "Veronica is a killer. She respects nothing but force." "I was terrified," Vivian admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He stopped in front of a steel door with a biometric scanner. He pressed his palm against it, and the door hissed open. "Welcome to the war room," he said. Inside, the walls were covered in screens displaying live feeds of stock markets, shipping routes, and security cameras from all over New York. But in the center of the room was a large, holographic table displaying a family tree. Dominic walked over to it and typed a command. A face appeared on the screen. It was Vivienne's face, but next to it was a picture of a man she hadn't seen in 20 years, her father, who had abandoned her and her mother when she was 5. "You asked why I chose you," Dominic said, looking at the hologram. "You think it's just biology?" "Just a scent." He tapped the image of her father. "Your father wasn't a salesman, Vivian. He was a hunter, one of the best the Guild ever had. He killed 30 of my kind before he vanished." Vivian stared at the screen, her world tilting on its axis. "That's impossible. My father sold insurance." "He sold death," Dominic corrected. "And when he disappeared, he stole something from the Valerius Pack. Something priceless. An artifact called the Moonstone Key." Dominic turned to her, his expression grave. "I didn't just bring you here to be my mate. Vivian, I brought you here because Gavin and the Northern Packs know who you are. They think you know where the key is." He stepped closer, trapping her against the console table. "They aren't going to just bully you with orange juice. They are going to torture you until you give them a location you don't even have." Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. "So, you're not protecting me. You're holding me hostage. You want the key too." Dominic's eyes flashed gold. "I want the key to stop a war. But make no mistake, Vivian, if I have to choose between the key and you—" He leaned down, his voice a dark whisper against her lips. "I don't know which one I would choose yet." Vivian spent the next 3 hours in the guest suite, pacing the floorboards until her feet ached. The revelation in the war room had changed everything. She wasn't just a random PR girl who had stumbled into a werewolf gala. She was the daughter of their greatest enemy. Elias, the silent butler, had delivered the clothes Dominic promised. True to his word, there was a rack of designer casual wear cashmere sweaters, jeans that looked tailored to her exact measurements, and heavy boots suitable for the terrain. But laying on the bed, wrapped in white tissue paper, was the white Oxford shirt. Vivienne picked it up. It was heavy cotton, high quality, and it smelled intensely of him cedar, rain, and that sharp, metallic scent of ozone. She put it on. She told herself it was just a shirt. But as she buttoned it, a strange warmth settled in her chest, a phantom comfort that fought against her logical fear. It was huge on her, the hem hitting her mid-thigh. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to get them sitting in a tower like a damsel. She waited until the hallway was quiet, then slipped out. The mansion was vast, a labyrinth of shadows and stone. She remembered the direction of the library, the place Gavin had mentioned the council meeting taking place earlier. The double doors to the library were unlocked. Inside, the room was a cavern of knowledge, smelling of old paper and leather. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held thousands of books. Vivian moved to the section labeled History of the North American Pax. She pulled down a heavy, leather-bound tome. She flipped through the pages, scanning for her father's name, Robert Clark. Nothing. She tried another book, The Great Hunter, Wars 1990 to 2005. There, in the index. Clark, Robert. Designation Red Hawk. She turned to page 204. There was a grainy photograph of a group of men standing over the carcass of a massive black wolf. In the center, holding a rifle, was her father. He looked younger, harder, but it was him. Vivian's hands shook. The caption read, Red Hawk, responsible for the culling of the Valerius Beta in 1999. He killed Dominic's father, a voice said from the shadows. Vivian spun around, dropping the book. Dominic was leaning against a bookshelf in the far corner, watching her. He had changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a black t-shirt that clung to his chest. He looked less like a king and more like a brawler. The caption is wrong, Dominic said, walking toward her. He didn't kill the Beta. He killed my father, the previous Alpha. Vivian backed up until she hit the library ladder. You said you killed your uncle to take the throne. I did, Dominic said, stopping a few feet away. My uncle took over after my father died. He was weak. But your father, he created the power vacuum that destroyed my childhood. He looked at the book on the floor, then at her. His gaze lingered on the white shirt she was wearing, his pupils dilated, swallowing the amber iris. You're wearing my scent, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. It's driving the guards crazy. They can smell you from the other side of the house. It tells them, back off. Is that why you gave it to me? Vivian asked, clutching the fabric. To mark your territory. Yes, Dominic admitted. And because you look good in it. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The air between them crackled. You should hate me, Vivian whispered. My father killed yours. I should. Dominic agreed. He reached out, his fingers tracing the collar of the shirt, grazing her neck. But biology doesn't care about history. My wolf wants to tear the world apart to keep you safe. It's inconvenient. Inconvenient. Vivian let out a shaky laugh. I'm a prisoner. Dominic. A bargaining chip for a key I don't have. Think. Vivian, Dominic urged, his hand cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, his touch rough but surprisingly gentle. Your father disappeared. He must have left you something. A safety deposit box, a toy, a lullaby. Hunters love codes. Vivian closed her eyes, trying to think past the distraction of his thumb on her skin. He left us nothing. Just debt. He walked out one day to buy cigarettes and never came back. He didn't walk out, Dominic said softly. He went underground because he stole the Moonstone key. The key opens the vault of the first Alpha. Inside is enough silver to wipe out every pack on the East Coast. If the Northern Pack gets it, we are extinct. Suddenly, the glass window of the library shattered. A canister smashed onto the floor. hissing. White smoke began to pour out instantly. "Gas!" Dominic roared. He grabbed Vivian, pulling her into his chest, burying her face in his shirt. "Hold your breath." He kicked the library doors open, dragging her into the hallway. But the hallway wasn't empty. 3 men in tactical gear, wearing gas masks, were waiting. They weren't Valerius guards. They wore a patch on their shoulders, a grey wolf skull. The Northern Pack. "Get behind me," Dominic ordered, pushing Vivian toward a stone pillar. Dominic didn't shift. He didn't have time. He launched himself at the first intruder with human fists, but supernatural speed. The sound of impact was sickening, a wet crunch of bone. Dominic ducked a knife swing from the second man and drove his elbow into the attacker's throat, crushing his windpipe. But the third man had a gun. Not a normal gun, a tranquilizer rifle. Thwip. A dart hit Dominic in the shoulder. He roared, ripping it out, but he stumbled. The neurotoxin was designed for alphas. "Run!" "Vivian," Dominic shouted, his voice slurring slightly. "Get to the safe room." Vivienne looked at the hallway behind her. It was clear. She could run. She could hide. But the third attacker was aiming the rifle again, right at Dominic's chest. Vivienne didn't think. She didn't analyze. She acted. She grabbed a heavy bronze bust of Julius Caesar from a pedestal next to her and swung it with all her might at the gunman's head. Clang! The man crumpled. Dominic, swaying on his feet, looked at her with wild, shocked eyes. He was fighting the drug, his veins turning black as his metabolism burned through the toxin. "You didn't run," he rasped. "I'm not my father," Vivian said, breathless, dropping the statue. "I don't leave people behind." Dominic lunged forward, grabbing her face with both hands. He kissed her hard, desperate, and tasting of blood and smoke. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was a seal. A thank you. A claim. "We have a traitor," Dominic growled, pulling back. Those men got through the perimeter. Someone let them in. He grabbed her hand. "Come with me. We're going hunting." The attack in the library was just the first wave. The estate alarms were finally blaring, a low, mournful siren that echoed across the valley. Dominic dragged Vivian not to the safe room, but to the garage. He bypassed the armored SUVs and went straight to a matte black Ducati motorcycle. "Get on," he ordered. "On a bike in the rain." Vivian shouted over the sirens. "The SUVs are tracked. If we have a traitor, they know the GPS codes. The bike is analog. Get on." Vivian climbed on behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He felt like solid rock. The engine roared to life, and they shot out of the garage, skidding onto the wet gravel driveway. They didn't go toward the main gate. Dominic swerved off-road, driving straight into the dense forest that bordered the estate. The bike bounced over roots and mud, the rain stinging Vivian's face like needles. "Where are we going?" she screamed into his back. "The hunting cabin," Dominic shouted back. "It's off the grid. My father built it. Only the bloodline knows where it is." They rode for 20 minutes, climbing higher into the Storm King mountain range. The air grew colder, turning the rain into sleet. Finally, Dominic killed the engine and coasted to a stop in a small clearing. A rough-hewn log cabin stood in the shadows of the pines. Dominic kicked the stand down and helped Vivian off. He was moving stiffly. The toxin was still in his system. "Inside," he said, scanning the trees. "Bar the door." Vivian rushed inside. The cabin was freezing, smelling of pine needles and dust. She found the heavy iron bar and dropped it across the door, just as Dominic stumbled in. He collapsed onto the dusty rug in front of the cold fireplace. "Dominic." Vivian fell to her knees beside him. He was sweating, his skin burning up. "The dart!" he gritted out, clutching his shoulder. It wasn't just tranquilizer, it was wolfsbane, concentrated liquid silver nitrate. What do I do? Vivian asked, panic rising in her throat. She was a PR manager. She fixed press releases, not poisoned werewolves. You have to cut it out, Dominic said, reaching for a knife strapped to his boot. He handed it to her. The blade was 6 inches of serrated steel. The entry wound. The silver is burning the tissue. You have to cut out the flesh around the wound. Vivian stared at the knife, her hands shaking uncontrollably. I can't. I'll hurt you. I will heal, Dominic gasped, his eyes flashing gold and then fading to grey. But if the silver reaches my heart, I die. Do it. Vivian. Do it now. Vivian took a deep breath. She thought of the man in the library, the way he had shielded her from the gas. She thought of her father, the hunter. Maybe the blood in her veins was good for something after all. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She ripped his shirt open, the expensive t-shirt tearing like paper. The wound on his shoulder was black and bubbling, smelling of sulfur. She poured a bottle of whiskey from the shelf over the blade to sterilize it. Dominic bit down on a piece of firewood. Do it! Vivian cut. Dominic roared, a sound that shook the cabin walls. Vivian cried, tears blinding her, but she didn't stop. She dug the tip of the knife in, scooping out the blackened flesh. Got it, she sobbed. Flickering the knife, a small, dissolving silver pellet fell onto the floor, sizzling. Dominic slumped back, unconscious. Vivian scrambled to clean the wound, tearing strips from her own shirt, the white Oxford, to bind his shoulder. She built a fire in the hearth, piling logs high until the room was blazing hot. She sat beside him for hours, watching his chest rise and fall. The wound was already closing, knitting together with supernatural speed. It was nearly dawn when he woke up. The fire had died down to embers. Vivian was curled up in a chair, holding the knife. Vivian, Dominic whispered. She jerked awake. You're alive. Dominic sat up, testing his shoulder. He grimaced, but he moved it. He looked at her, seeing the blood on her hands. His blood. You saved me, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. A hunter's daughter saved the Alpha King. I told you, Vivian said, her voice tired. I'm not my father. Dominic stood up and walked over to her. He took the knife from her hand and set it on the table. Then he pulled her out of the chair and into his lap. He didn't do anything sexual. He just held her, burying his face in her hair, breathing her in. You aren't a prisoner anymore, he said quietly. Does that mean I can go home? Vivian asked, her head resting on his chest. No, Dominic said. It means you are my partner, and we are going to kill the people who did this. Who was it? Vivian asked. Who let them in? Dominic pulled back, his eyes hard. The security codes were bypassed using a biometric override. Only 3 people have that access. Me, Gavin, and Veronica, Vivian guessed. No, Dominic shook his head. Veronica is a brute, but she's loyal to the pack structure. The third person is the pack elder, Silas. Silas. He was my father's best friend, Dominic said darkly. He raised me, and if he turned off the alarms, it means the Northern Pack promised him the one thing I couldn't give him. What? Immortality, Dominic said. The Moonstone Key doesn't just open a vault of silver. Legend says it opens the crypt of the first Alpha, and his blood grants eternal life. Dominic stood up, pulling Vivienne with him. We have to go back. Tonight is the blood moon. If Silas has the key, he will try to open the vault tonight. But we don't have the key, Vivian argued. My father stole it. Dominic looked at her, his eyes travelling to the necklace she was wearing. It was a cheap thing, a silver locket she had worn every day since she was 5. Her father had given it to her the day he left. "Vivian," Dominic said slowly, "let me see your locket." Vivian touched it. "It's junk jewelry. It doesn't even open. It's rusted shut." Dominic reached out, his claw tipping gently against the metal. "It's not rust. It's a seal. A blood seal." He pricked his own finger with a claw, letting a single drop of alpha blood fall onto the locket. The silver hissed. The locket clicked. It sprang open. Inside wasn't a picture. It was a small, glowing gemstone, pulsating with a soft, blue light. The moonstone key. "It's been on your neck for 20 years, Dominic whispered. Vivian stared at the stone. "He didn't leave me nothing. He left me the most dangerous thing in the world." "And now," Dominic said, a savage grin spreading across his face, "we are going to use it to trap a rat." The storm had turned into a full-blown gale by the time the Ducati roared back through the iron gates of the Valerius estate. Dominic didn't drive to the garage. He drove the bike straight up the marble steps, skidding to a halt in the foyer. The lock on the front door didn't need a key. It shattered under his boot. "The crypts," Dominic growled, his eyes already flickering with the golden light of the wolf. "I can smell the sulfur. They're trying to melt the seals." He led Vivian to the library, to the shelf holding Dante's Inferno. With a sharp pull, the bookcase groaned open, revealing a stone spiral staircase that plunged into the earth. The air that rushed up was cold, heavy with the scent of damp soil and ancient danger. They descended into the shadows. At the bottom, the vast, torch-lit chamber was crowded. In the center, Councilman Victor the Traitor stood over Gavin, who was beaten, bloody, and barely conscious. Flanking Victor were 12 soldiers wearing the Grey Wolf insignia of the North. "Open it!" Victor shouted, kicking Gavin in the ribs. "You have the blood. Open the vault." "He can't!" Dominic's voice boomed, filling the cavern. He stepped into the light, his presence heavy and suffocating. "But I can open your throat. Victor." Victor spun around. Fear flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a greedy sneer as his gaze landed on Vivian's chest. "Ah," Victor smiled, pointing a trembling finger. "The hunter's daughter," and she brought the key. He saw the locket glowing blue against her skin. "The Northern Alpha is minutes away." Victor laughed. "Kill the king. Bring me the girl. I want that key." The 12 soldiers lunged. "Vivian, run!" Dominic roared. He intercepted the first wave, a blur of violence and human fury. Bones snapped and bodies flew as he fought to keep them away from her. But he was outnumbered. One soldier slipped past his guard, charging straight for Vivian. She scrambled back against a stone sarcophagus, fumbling with the locket. Dominic had called it a key. Her father had been a hunter. "Think," she screamed internally. "Hunters don't build keys for monsters. They build traps." The soldier grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. "Give it to me, bitch!" Vivian grabbed the locket with both hands. She didn't try to open the clasp. She twisted the glowing gemstone counterclockwise, feeling a mechanism click. On the back, she saw the tiny inscription she had missed for 20 years. "Lux in tenebris, light in darkness." "Light in darkness," she whispered. She ripped the necklace from her neck and threw it at the soldier's feet. Crack! The gemstone didn't unlock a door. It exploded. A blinding flash of UV light and a cloud of pressurized silver dust detonated like a grenade. The soldier screamed a sound that tore through the crypt as the silver burned his skin and the UV light blinded his sensitive eyes. The explosion rocked the chamber, stunning everyone. "Dominic, now!" Vivienne screamed. Dominic shielded his eyes from the flash, then seized the moment. He let go of his control. There was a sickening sound of tearing fabric and cracking bone. In the blink of an eye, The man was gone. In his place stood a massive, midnight black wolf, standing 4 feet tall at the shoulder. The Wolf of Wall Street was real. The wolf launched himself at Victor. The traitor didn't stand a chance. Dominic pinned the elder to the stone floor, jaws snapping around his throat. "I surrender!" Victor shrieked, dropping his weapon. "The pact, I surrender!" The wolf froze. By law, a surrender had to be accepted. Dominic's golden eyes bore into the traitor, his growl shaking the walls. But Victor's hand slid toward a concealed silver dagger in his boot. Vivian saw the glint of metal. "Dominic! Look out!" She didn't think. She grabbed a rusted ceremonial sword from a nearby statue and swung it with all her strength. The heavy blade came down, severing Victor's hand just as he raised the dagger. Victor screamed, clutching his stump. Dominic didn't hesitate this time. The wolf snarled and silenced the traitor permanently. The remaining northern soldiers, seeing their leader dead and the Alpha King in his full, terrifying form, dropped their weapons. They fell to their knees, baring their necks in submission. The wolf turned to Vivian. He was covered in blood. Terrifying. A monster from a nightmare. Vivian didn't flinch. She walked toward him, stepping over the debris. She reached out a trembling hand. "Dominic," she whispered. The wolf lowered his massive head, nudging his wet nose against her palm. He whined, a soft, puppy-like sound. Slowly, the bones reshaped. The fur receded. Dominic collapsed onto the stone floor, back in human form, naked and battered, but alive. Vivian fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around him. "You're okay," she sobbed. Gavin limped over, coughing as he leaned against a pillar. "Well," he wheezed, looking at the dead traitor and the shattered locket. "I guess the interview period is over. You're hired." 3 months later. The Obsidian Gala returned to the Valerius estate. The press was in a frenzy. The stocks were at an all-time high, and the merger with the Northern Territories was complete. Vivian stood on the high balcony, overlooking the sea of black ties and diamonds. She wasn't wearing a borrowed dress tonight. She wore a custom gown of midnight blue silk that moved like water around her. "You're thinking too loud." A low voice rumbled behind her. Dominic wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He was in a tuxedo, pristine and sharp, but Vivian felt the solid warmth of him, the power thrumming just beneath the surface. "I was just reviewing my contract," Vivian teased, leaning her head back against his shoulder. "The no leaving the premises clause is getting old. I want to go to Paris." "Paris," Dominic mused, his lips brushing the sensitive skin behind her ear. "We own a hotel in Paris. I could buy the city for you. Just a vacation. Dominic, not a hostile takeover. With you, my love." He turned her around, his amber eyes burning with that familiar, possessive fire. "Everything is a takeover. You walked into a room and stole my kingdom with a whisper." He reached into his pocket. This time, it wasn't a contract. It was a velvet box containing a yellow diamond, flawless and massive. "I don't need a liaison anymore," Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion. "I need a queen." Vivian looked at the ring, then up at the man who had locked a door and changed her destiny. "You already roared mine," she smiled, placing her hand over his heart. "I think it's time I set it back." Dominic grinned a true, boyish grin that lightened the darkness in his eyes. "Say it," he challenged. Vivian pulled him down by his lapels, kissing him before he could speak again. "Mine," she whispered against his lips. And somewhere in the distance, deep in the Valerius woods, a wolf howled in triumph. And that is the story of how Vivian Clark went from a PR assistant to the queen of the supernatural underworld. She tamed the beast not with magic, but with courage and a little bit of hunter ingenuity. The Alpha King locked the door to keep her in, but in the end, she was the one holding the key to his heart. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of romance, betrayal, and werewolf action, please give this video a massive thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. What did you think of the twist with the locket? Did you suspect the Elder? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I have a new dark romance story coming next week, involving a vampire prince and a girl who hates the sight of blood. You do not want to miss it. Thanks for listening.